Came across this article and I really enjoyed it. And it got me thinking of a few things. Let's switch into it here. But the gist of it was Mercedes solar paint could make plugging in EVs a thing of the past. Now, it's a lot to that statement. There's a lot to that sentence. There's a lot to that statement. And I figure we can unpack it. We can explore a little bit and we can see what we think about it. But when we talk about these technologies, when I look at these articles, and I love technology and I live off grid. So, as it applies to how we live and the future of sustainability, it's fascinating to be on this learning curve. And so I feel like there's two, just like almost technology hardware, there's two distinct camps, and then they sort of blend in the middle. There's sort of the reality, and the reality is where I sit in my colorful chair today, where we sit at our house, is that we actually live off the grid. And balancing that all out has meant understanding how everything works together. And from the micro level of how much power we have for this toaster oven to toast our bagels, to the macro level of understanding the seasonal changes and ups and downs with solar input, how much we can collect. I mean, in the summertime, it's like the Wild West. It's a boom. We're just getting as much power as we can. And in the wintertime, as we're rolling into now, we have to be a little bit more careful with how we use our power and how we relate to it. And so we have the reality of the situation that we live in. And then we sort of have the virtual reality, like where we're going to get to, what's possible if budget and time were no limit, then a lot of other strategies would be in place. But it's sort of like, it's not quite there yet. And so the Mercedes solar paint, this article, I think this falls into that virtual reality standpoint where have they made it work? Have they proved the technology virtually in a lab, on a spreadsheet? When you're just looking at this analytically, does it work? Work? Yeah, probably the numbers run. But does this pan out and does this meet the actual criteria and satisfy the headline? So I don't know about that, and we got to explore it. And how long until this type of technology is actually available for commercial use, is available for commercial use to the degree that people in everyday life can start to incorporate this into their lives. So we're going to unpack this article for a minute. We'll try to do it as quick as we can here. So a photovoltaic paste under development could turn ordinary body panels into solar panels. So right off the bat there, you start to see a little bit of a differentiation between the article headline, solar paint. That's what I read when I saw it. That's what I saw. But it's a paste that goes underneath. And I've read this has been in development for a couple of years. And this is a Motor Trend article. So appreciate that. So it sounds like an idea straight out of a 5-year-old's imagination, or any year-old's imagination that's got a good imagination. A car covered in solar panels runs entirely on energy from the sun. Right? Okay. As far-fetched as it seems, this isn't pure fantasy. Okay, so we're in the virtual reality. Again, that's what we're calling it. It's not pure fantasy, but it's virtual reality. Mercedes-Benz says it's developing a solar paint that would allow electric vehicle owners in places like Los Angeles to power their daily driving without ever plugging in. So good news for Los Angeles is that you guys can power your car without ever plugging in. The rest of us, though, apparently the sun does not work the same here. Maybe they calculate. I'm sure they calculated this out. Look at this. A G-Wagon looks like electric G-Wagon.
Soaks up moderately sized bumps and dips like they're child's play.
That's cool. That's not this car, but that's still kind of cool. Electric G-Wagon with solar. So this is, I don't know, what is this? I don't know. Let's see what it says. I'm a visual learner, but we'll read together. The German automaker teased the idea last week during a future technology showcase at its R&D center in Sindelfingen, Germany. If I pronounce that anywhere close to right, I'd be happy. The photovoltaic material starts as a paste and is applied to body panels in a layer that's just 5 micrometers thick, thinner than a human hair. That seems thin, very thin paste. Covering every body panel of a mid-sized SUV with the material would create 118 square feet of sun harnessing surface area, a more than 3-fold increase compared to the 32 square feet available from a single flexible panel on the roof. And so here's this little graphic, solar coating. All right, I got a lot of questions about this. So first of all, super thin, but it has to go on before the paint, after the paint. It's a photovoltaic material that starts as a paste. They must pigment it with some color and then be able to apply it that would be the paint. You wouldn't need I'm just trying to think like, the expenses or the production of how this would be applied to the car. Not that so covering every body panel of a mid-size SUV. So I think it's funny when they just say like a mid-size SUV, because you're Mercedes, right? Like you could just say our Mercedes, whatever, X5, X3, X something, the G-Wagon, I don't know, but like you could actually use a specific vehicle. I mean, maybe that's what I need to do here is start to pull some of this apart and actually like bring it from virtual reality into reality, because it says covering every body panel of a mid-size SUV with the material would create 118 square feet. They used a specific SUV. I mean, unless they just took every SUV in the market and then axonometrically expanded it and then took the surface area of every curved panel. So that's such a specific number. And then they averaged it all out. Did they average it out, or is it the median? Is it the mean? I have so many questions. They just give us a vehicle you used. More than threefold increase compared to the 32 square feet available. It's almost a fourfold increase from a single flexible panel on a roof. Now, what single flexible? These panels are available on the market. So what we're going to is 118 square feet of sun harnessing surface, virtual reality, and then they're swinging this over to compared to 32 square feet of actual reality that you could get probably any number of panels. And 32 square feet, so what's that? 5 by 8 is 40. So 4 by 8, 32. That's about one panel. So it's one panel. We want to. This is their own little G-Wagon thing here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 panels on that thing. That's going to produce more than 32 square feet, I would think. I don't know. What do I know? Anyway, let's see what their little graphic here says. Can we see that? Is that something? That's something that's in the, yeah. It says, oops, sorry, swinging around here. Principle, the entire car body is coated with photovoltaic paint, which generates electrical energy. Okay, so solar panels. The energy can be used immediately for driving or is stored in the battery when the vehicle is stationary. Okay, here's a first great question. All right, I'm going to read through this and then I'm going to ask the first great question. Very effective. Efficiency of over 20%. Efficiency of what? Like, what does that mean? The available sunlight that's hitting that surface, the available sunlight that's generated for that particular region and that's just so vague. This stuff is so vague. That's why I want to unpack it with everybody, because I want to understand it. And I feel like if we can understand it or not understand it collectively, or if just one more person can weigh in on this, then it validates me trying to figure out how this would actually apply to both how we live, but the greater future of where this is all headed. A completely new type of nanoparticle-based paint allows 94% of the sun's energy to pass through the solar coating. Why does this feel like a Spider-Man? The beginning of a Spider-Man movie. The solar coating then comes alive and takes over humanity in Gotham City. The solar coating is located between the body panel and the colored paint. So it's different. It's not a pigment. It's not a pigment. Extremely thin. That's all it says. Extremely thin. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's, for a minute here, let's go back. The energy can be used immediately for driving or is stored in the battery when the vehicle is stationary. Now, let's go back. I know this is not as exciting, but here's for all intents and purposes, you see our solar shed that's in the back there. We have 32 panels on that shed. Let's pretend that's a vehicle. Let's just pretend it's a car. I mean, it's not. It looks a little like a Cybertruck. I'm not going to lie. So anyway, let's say, so right now, as I'm driving. Let's say I'm driving. The power that we're getting from here, and I'm going to pull it up. I'll pull it up right now too. Here we go. The power that we're getting from those solar panels. So in theory, whatever's coating our car, our Cybertruck, or the panels that we mounted on it, we could use for driving, or we could store in the battery. So let's just see here in real time. Oh, and this is actually this morning. This was a little bit earlier because it was 10 o'clock. So we're a couple hours later now, but let me actually have this one because this is more indicative. So this is a little bit later. This is a half an hour later. This just goes to show you the swing in and the inconsistencies and unpredictabilities of power production and power storage and power usage, frankly, and how you kind of have to adjust all of them in real time when you're either driving a car as our wedge-shaped cyber truck thing, or you're living in a house that's covered that has solar that it relies on solar power. So here we are, solar. You could see we're producing 0.3. Home, we are using 0.6. It is a gray day. It's kind of rainy. It's actually just started to rain up here now. And so what we're seeing is this is kind of the conditions. And so we're not producing a ton. In the morning, we did produce a little, we probably made like 3 or 4 kilowatts so far. But long story being short, if that's a truck, if that's our cyber truck covered in solar panel, or Mercedes, whatever, next generation covered in photovoltaic paint, and it's just sitting there, it's not producing that much power. We got a pretty massive setup there. I mean, it's designed for our house. It's designed for our family of 5. And so the car, I don't know how much surface area it has, but they called it 118 square feet. And the surface area of our shed, oh, it's got to be 500, 600. I bet 600 and change square feet. So we have 6 times the surface area, and we're all covered in solar panels. So whatever vehicle is going to be sitting there, whether you need it for driving or whether you need it for battery storage on a day like today, you're not going to get much. And I get that's why they use Los Angeles probably as a baseline, because there's a high percentage of really sunny days there, so that they can hit that peak margin where they're like, look at how much this is producing, even though they're going to have their fair share of these days too. It's everywhere. So the point is, producing enough to drive, producing enough to not in this weather, you're not going to. And so what does that mean? Like some of these vehicles, our house in our solar shed, our car, if that was a car, it would have a third of the power that a Tesla Cybertruck would have, that a Ford F-150 Lightning would have, that a Rivian would have. We have a third of the power we're storing. Part of that was because we designed this 5 years ago, and it was a different landscape back then. But a big part of that is because vehicles need so much power to move. And I've been doing a little research on it. I guess the electric vehicles are so much more efficient than the internal combustion engine, just in terms of not having to dissipate the amount of heat and utilizing all of that power. But it still uses so much power. And our electric vehicle, I mean, we definitely see that different ranges and different amounts of usages and different times of year have a very significant effect on the power that gets used. So getting back to the article, the energy can be used immediately for driving, or it makes it seem like, bam, sun power, we're driving this car that in reality needs, I don't know how much it actually needs per. I think we get it was 4, what do we have, 4 kilowatts to the mile, 3 kilowatts to the mile, something like that. So you're talking about using 3 or 4 kilowatts every mile. So every 10 miles, if I'm just doing my zeros math correctly, every 10 miles, that's 30 or 40 kilowatts. Now, I just told you our house was 40 kilowatts. So that means every 10 miles, in theory, potentially, you could be using, I must be doing that math wrong or it's 4. I'll have to go back and do that math. Math wasn't my strong suit, but somebody could chime in. Somebody who's better at math could chime in on that. My whole point being is you're not going to have enough power there to sustain real everyday driving. Let's see what they have to say about that, though. Let's go back. Mercedes claims such a vehicle could capture enough energy to drive about 12,500 miles a year in sun-soaked Los Angeles. That's right. A cloudier city, such as Stuttgart, Germany, sees enough sunshine to provide 7,500 miles a year. So about a little bit of half that. Mercedes isn't saying exactly what the photovoltaic paste is made of, other than it contains no rare earths, no silicone, and relies on readily available non-toxic raw materials. There's like fancy graphics. They look like very futuristic, slightly dystopian fancy graphics. And look, around the world, there's like Stuttgart and Los Angeles and Beijing. And it says the potential range achieved depends on the actual solar radiation. Yeah, no kidding. Actual conditions matter. Actual sunshine matters. You've given us no real numbers on that. Each body panel needs to be galvanically isolated and wired into a power converter that sends the electricity to the battery or directly to the motors. That sounds complicated. Each body panel has to be wired, isolated, galvanically isolated? That sounds fancy. It sounds like something that would happen to like an X-Man. He was galvanically isolated. The solar materials topped with a nanoparticle, again with the nanoparticle-based paint, that allows 94% of the sun's energy to reach the photovoltaic coating while offering a full spectrum of color choice. Darker colors capture more energy than the lighter hues. Yep. That's on par with today's commercially available solar panels. As an advanced research project, it's too soon to know if this solar paint will make it to production. But the fact that Mercedes is talking about it publicly means that there's some substance behind the concept. I agree. Thank you. It's Eric Tingwall from Motor Trend. I appreciate that. See, this is so fascinating because, again, virtual reality. And we need to have the conversations because there's the technology to push us through to what those next steps are, solid state batteries, and if hydrogen power is ever anything, or these are the conversations we need to have in terms of how it works. Read a lot about construction equipment, mining equipment, heavy construction equipment, crane operation that are converting a lot to electric usages because the battery capacities are better, the outputs are stronger, and there's no emissions. So it's a healthier, cleaner, more efficient working environment that you could get more done with. And when you start to be able to capture the electricity to offset the power that we'll be pulling from the grid, which is also making incredible strides forward, we have all of these technologies that just kind of melt together. And it's similar to when we're putting together maybe like a virtual reality headset or augmented reality glasses, Ray-Ban, whoever's working on these things. And it's like you have all these technologies. You got the speakers hooked up. You got little micrometers and little motion sensors, and you've got all kinds of glass, specialized coatings and glasses. All these technologies actually developed independently to a certain degree, but then a lot of smart people got in rooms together and were able to put these technologies together in a way that 20 years ago, I mean, look, I have a conversation on our phone or our watch, just like Dick Tracy. I mean, I don't know if people remember Dick Tracy, but that dude used to have the sickest watch. And I'd be like, imagine having a watch like that. And like now look where we're at. It's like so the future comes, and it's up to us to give it a little bit of definition and guidance in terms of how it's going to be practical and useful. Because when it starts to become more accessible for people, and when it starts to become a commodity that actually is creates efficiency and increase in quality of life for people, and actually affordable, then we want to make sure that we've thought about its place and how it can be the most effective. And so that's when it's like, it's great to see these headlines where it's like, solar paint, but it's not really a solar paint, it's a coating. And we have those solar coatings and we could use that. But like, let's say, all right, they're talking about coating every body panel. Now think about this in reality. Again, this should be broken down. I could break this down to much more clarity. So thank you for fumbling and stumbling your way through this with me. But every body panel, you're driving through, I'm going to pull this up. Let's pull up our solar shed in the background there, AKA, for all intents and purposes today, that's our large Cybertruck. Kind of got the same angles. And so there's no sun, there's very little sun today. And so it's not like we're capturing a lot, maybe 0.5 to 1.5 on a day like today, maybe a little above 2. But the place we're going to largely capture it is that southwestern facing large what do you call it? Where all the solar panels are, roof slope. Thank you. Where all the solar panels are. So that's what's producing the energy. The front side where the doors are, the side facing us with a small window. It's producing much less to very little to nothing. Some of the underside, you could make the argument that there's panels on the side of our solar shed and the underside of our solar shed / Cybertruck that wouldn't be producing power at all. And so now you're spending cost output to coat these things, to electrically link all these things, to network them all with some kind of an interface or a CMOS or some kind of, way that these things can communicate together. And so now you're depending on all of that to happen for a 10 square foot, 3 square foot panel that might not see any sunshine. And when you're driving, if this thing was moving, then you'd constantly be losing the best angle. It's not like here where we could orient our solar shed or our ground mount installation or whatever you might use for panels. You could orient it and optimize it. And when you're driving, when you're parking, if you're in your garage, like you don't get any of the luxury of that. And so it just doesn't really make sense necessarily unless it was just as cheap to make the paint with the solar coating baked into it, then it would be to do all this work to capture 118 square feet of potentially, they call it 118 square feet, but again, they don't differentiate between, well, only 10% of it is really going to be functional and usable, if that. And of that, it's going to fluctuate in how much power it's getting because all the conditions are constantly changing. So I love the theory. I love the idea that they're like Aptera, like there's a couple really great examples of it. Right, they have Aptera's like, sorry, we're getting a little sidetracked together here. Aptera, I think that was that car. Yeah, Aptera Motors. Yeah, here we go. Share this tab instead. Driven by the sun. All right. So if we're gonna say, this version of electric, solar-based, photovoltaic-based electric driving, this is where we're at. So again, the paint, virtual reality. My life, reality. This is reality. This is like augmented reality. This is super cool. You could get this. This is like I feel like a little beta style, but like this is the bridge to get from A to B. So if we're talking about Mercedes doing the paint and we're talking about this company, Aptera Motors, putting this car together, driven by the sun, I think we're on the right track to something. We're on the right, the highway or an avenue at least, getting to that point where it's, we could pick up speed with it. But there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of places we got to go to get there. And it's interesting just learning, seeing, exploring this all together and grounding it back to reality, because when you think about it and when you look at, like, there's our mini split. This is a great little way to kind of talk about our mini split. Like how much power so I'm heating a 600 square foot space. My studio up here, it's 20 feet by 30 feet. It's this is all I have to heat it. And it heats really well. So when we use it, it's super efficient. And when we have it on, I will pull up exactly. This is when we had it on. And this is earlier in the day, a couple hours ago, when we were making 1.7 kilowatts, even though it's cloudy and overcast and it was a little drizzly, still made 1.7 kilowatts. And the mini split up here kicked on to 1.5 kilowatts, which is super efficient. I feel like for heating a 600 square foot space, it's nice and cozy in here. And I know I'm wearing my hat and everything, but that's because I'm kind of in a spot that doesn't always get the heat, and I'm just comfortable in my hat. So I kind of wear it and get comfortable with it. But the heating works really well. This Mitsubishi heater, if you don't want to take my word for it, yeah, you don't have to. We got it at 66 degrees, so you can see I'm kind of tucked away in the back, and got the mini split up high, but it kicks out a lot of power. And even all the animals love hanging out up here with me too. So as you'll see in a second, we got Huckleberry hanging out on the couch. And trust me, if it wasn't warm up here, you wouldn't be hanging out up here, would you? Would you, buddy? No, it's really warm. Leave me alone. I'm trying to sleep. So that's how it rolls. So it's nice to have that practical balance to saying, okay, there's companies out there that are way out there and developing the future. There's companies out there that are applying what the structure, strategies, and the concepts we have now into that next step, that next foothold, like Aptera Motors. And then there's us who just want to run on 40 kilowatts on our solar shed, and we want to get as much sun as we can. And our mini split uses 1.5 kilowatts. So we know that, we've got a finite amount of power we could use. And if we have 2 or 3 great days, we have to balance using the fireplace, using the mini split, and everybody's got to kind of understand how that all plays together. But we're coming to the point where it's getting more automated, it's getting more transparent, the information is getting out there, and how we use the power is making more sense. So it's just great to see everybody pushing the boundaries and driving us down the highway of energy independence. And it's going to redefine how we all connect to ourselves and how we use the power and connect to each other. So it's exciting. It's exciting to talk about. And thanks for sticking around with me for this one. It's a longer one, but I might break down some of it at some point. Regardless, it's gray out here. Hope it's sunny where you are. Hope everybody's got enough power for your day, inside and out. And I will catch you on the flip.